So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So did we hang up on Miss O'Brien in there?
Really? Thank you.
You're welcome.
She is using landline.
Probably gonna be fun. And I mean that with
I'm sorry. Why she forgot to hang up
As
from
soon
the
as we
first
get Miss
one.
O'Brien on the line, we'll go into the next.
Gentle as it was.
I don't.
And I did get your note about the vouchers, Miss Redding. I will look at my schedule. I am currently without a vehicle, so
Have you been to our website?
stop
this
being
week?
repaired because of the person who scraped along the side of it last
on the
March
board
in the
packet
school
on our
parking lot, but was
website.
kind enough
It
to leave
came
a
in
note,
like
so their insurance is
2 seconds.
$1,600.
It used to take minutes. I was, and it's not that it's not chocked full of.
Good stuff.
Okay,
Boom.
okay. I'll call to order the special meeting of the governing board. Let the record show all members are present. Miss O'Brien is telephonic. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Do we need to, we don't have to call for a public hearing. This is actually a public hearing. So Jim, this is the Jim show, public hearing, so comments are welcome.
President Fisher, members of the board, Dr. Finch. This evening we have several items on the public hearing that we need to discuss. So the insurance proceeds, a newly enacted legislative teacher-only pay plan, the truth and taxation statement, and then we need to hold the hearing on the actual expenditure budget. This is much of this is a repeat of what we talked about on June 27th, but we are obligated to go through it again this evening and also to accept any public comments. No actions taken during the public statute so that the plan isn't necessary, but unless we're going to spend more than $250,000, I doubt that we're going to get to $250,000, but we do need to provide a notice, so the hearing's not required. The hearing's required when we get to $250,000, but the notice is required regardless of how much we spend out of the insurance proceeds. This is money that's generated from typically insurance claims, and I say typically, I think it's 100% from insurance claims. There's some interest that's earned on it as well. We project about $25,000 of new revenue for about $75,000. We use this money to offset the losses. So if there's some damage to a vehicle, we would deposit the money in this fund. So that way it does not go against our budget limit capacity. It's maintained for in a separate fund. So unless there's a reason for me to pause between all these, I'll just keep moving through the hearing. So feel free to stop me if you are so inclined. The teacher-only legislative pay, and just another full disclosure, this is a terminology that I created. I don't know that this is what it's generally called. The legislature enacted it, so that's why I'm calling it teacher-only legislative pay. It is the 1.06%. So this is the background. It is specifically only for those teachers that taught in both the now prior year, fiscal year 17, and will be continuing to teach in fiscal year 18. And is 1.06% of their FY17 instructional compensation. And that gets calculated by the Department of Education, supposed to be allocated to us on December 1st. There are some requirements of this, so I created a resolution out of this that you'll see in the board packet itself that just attests to all the requirements have been met at this point in time now that we're conducting the hearing. This is our plan itself. And there is a unique component to this that I've mentioned orally to the board on at least one occasion, and that is that we would pay this not only to our teachers, but also for those teachers that participate in our phased retirement plan, so known as our Smart Schools program. And the thought behind that is this amount gets added to our base revenue control limit, and so that affects our M&O override. That additional bump in the override is greater than the cost to be able to afford this to some of our most tenured employees that participate in our phased retirement plan. The cost or the projected impact is about $25,000. We can only project it at this point in time because we don't know who's going to participate in the phased retirement plan. There are 4 opportunities throughout the year for somebody to join that plan if they meet the criteria. So that's the one thing that we included in our plan, is that we would pay all teachers, our regular teachers that are continuing, as well as anybody that would be on the phased retirement plan. And it has to cover both years, fiscal year 17 and 18, because you have to be a teacher in both years to be eligible for the plan. But we would pay those people out of the M&O override increase that we generate from this being part of the budget itself. And then finally, we anticipate again that the Department of Education will distribute the money on or near December 1st. So we had targeted December 21st as the pay date. If it won't be on December 21st, it'll be on the next pay date after the funds become available. So we need the proceeds to make this, to be able to afford to pay this out, just so that would be part of the plan. So any questions regarding the plan? Again, we're not voting on the plan yet, but we will later during the regular meeting. Okay. The truth in taxation notice, and this is solely due to the inclusion of $400,000 in the proposed budget for the Arrowhead modernization project. This particular project, or this school, is on 2 major thoroughfares, 75th Avenue and Union Hills, and the vehicular circulation at this school needs to be improved. We are anticipating that to be about $400,000. We don't have the design yet. In fact, later in the board agenda, you will consider naming the architect of record. That hasn't even been formally adopted by the board yet. So we are projecting that based on the best information that we have at this point in time. We do not have a design at this point in time, and certainly don't have any costs associated with the design that we don't have. This generates 2 cents on the tax rate. So that's 2 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. Remember, assessed valuation is assessed for residential properties at 10% of the assessed value. And the language that you see here is prescribed for us in statute. It has to read exactly as it is shown on this slide, and has been published as required in a paper of general circulation as well. So this is a vote that the board gets to make in regards to whether or not we want to levy for this additional $400,000, and it'd be part of the approvals that would happen at the board at the regular meeting immediately following this. I know there were some questions about this. I want to make sure I covered as much of that as possible, so I'll pause to see if I've covered all the questions.
Oh, I'll just say that. The question more so was, is this something that we did last year? Have we had adjacent ways and we're continuing it, or is this new? That was more so the question, which I don't believe we exactly answered. So did we currently collect adjacent ways last year on a different project?
So yes, as the note off to the side indicates, yes, we had a $500,000 adjacent ways budget in fiscal year 17 for improvements that were made at the Desert Sky modernization project.
So then this is actually a reduction of the amount that we collected last year?
It is $100,000 less than the adjacent ways amount from last year, but that's not the way the taxation notice is calculated. It assumes that you reset the adjacent ways to 0 every year.
No, and I understand that, but what I want to know is when my constituents look at their tax bill, is it going to go up or down? Because the reality is last year it was there. Is what's going to be there this year less?
Total tax or the tax associated?
The tax associated with this item, because the total tax we don't have total control of. you have fire, you have a lot of other things that come into the setting of their tax rates. I just want to know that we are not agreeing to add to their tax. Or if we are, I think it needs to be a conscious decision of what we're doing. That's what I'm trying to determine, is what is the impact to our taxpayer.
So, again, it's 2 cents per $100 of assessed valuation is what it requires to generate the $400,000 worth of levy.
Okay, so last year we charged 2.5 cents or 3.
Yeah, 2.1 cents.
Yeah, so they pay it each year. When we set it, correct me if I'm wrong, when we set it each year, that's good for that year, because that's when you set your rates. So last year, we would have set the rate at a higher amount. We're actually setting the rate again, but it's a lower amount than we set it last year. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's not inaccurate, but again, the notice requires us to reset it to 0. So it assumes that the assessed valuation, that the adjacent ways budget will be 0 every year. So it's an increase above 0. So even if you were to levy $1, which would be negligible on the tax rate, you'd still be obligated to this truth in taxation notice.
Okay, so the notice says they have to, by statute, we have to say this. We have to go to 0 and we have to say this. But we're not increasing? That was what I needed to know before I could answer the question that was asked. We're not increasing the tax bill. When they receive their tax bill, it will be 2 cents on versus 2 point whatever it was last.
Okay, but then my question would be, well, so we would be approving to increase their taxes, even though they've already approved a bond and an override. And within the bond, there were renovation projects at various schools for $7 million each. Why wouldn't that $7 million cover this $400,000?
President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, that's a great question. And many of these improvements are, as the name suggests, they're improvements to the adjacent properties, and something that we don't always have the final say in. So the municipal jurisdiction, so in this case at Arrowhead would be the city of Glendale, will have input as to what the drive approaches and the improvements of the adjacent street, which we don't own, are going to be required as part of bringing the school up to the current code and making the improvements that we need to consider for the vehicular flow patterns of the parking lot. So we can include it, again, the statute allows for us to be able to have the board consider including adjacent ways. And traditionally, like we did last year for Desert Skies, traditionally there's an adjacent ways component to those approvals. And just one final point, the School Facilities Board also has to approve of the final design of these before it can actually, before we can expend the money.
So we cannot use the bond money to pay for the parking lot because the city has input? Is that what you're saying?
No, I did not say that. I said that because we don't have full control over it and the statute considers this option as a mechanism to pay for those things, that we're taking advantage of it. The bond could pay for it, definitely. It would
Do you have
reduce
money
the-
in the, do we have, I mean, because the voters approved the bond and it did include a lot of renovation money, and I think we had it allocated at $7 million a school, and then those are the funds being used to renovate Arrowhead. If we have the $400,000 in those funds, I don't think it's appropriate to increase the tax rate.
And that's a decision that needs to be made by the board collectively tonight. And so the actual budget for Arrowhead would be reduced then. Right now, we're planning on $7.4 million, including this $400,000 pending the board's decision. If not, it'll be $7 million, and all the improvements that are going to be required by the city will have to be included in that $7 million.
How, what was the dollar amount of the improvements required by the city for the previous school? How are we coming up with 400,000?
That President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, that's an estimate based on our construction administration's best guess at the improvements based on what we know today, the condition that exists. Desert Sky Middle School is a school in the city of Glendale, and so we have some knowledge. It was $500,000 for the parking lot improvements and fire lane improvements that were required and agreed to by the School Facilities Board. The total cost of the improvements was just over $500,000 at Desert Sky Middle School, but we only had included the $500,000 in the adjacent ways levy. So the difference had to come out of the, and in this case, at a middle school, since they're larger, there was an $8 million bond allocation for that. So, and I won't have the exact numbers, but this will be close. If it was actually $560,000, $500,000 was paid from adjacent ways, $60,000 was paid out of the $8 million for that bond, that specific bond project.
And that dollar amount was all mandated by the city for improvements? None of those were things we wanted to do? That was all city mandates?
President Fisher and Ms. Tweedy, I think there was a combination of improvements to the parking configuration and flow at Desert Sky, which is on our property, our decision, but it involves the improvements of safe ingress and egress so that the fire department can also use that access to get to the school. So it was our choice to change the configuration, and once we decided we wanted to change it, it had to be brought up to the code that the city required. So our choice to change it, the city then gets to say, if you're going to change it, you have to bring it up to the current codes. And so the city participated in making it meet those requirements.
Mr. Miglerino, if we were to approve $400,000 and it did not take all of the $400,000, what would happen to the remaining money?
President Fisher, Ms. Ordway, if it, the adjacent ways money would be levied, but meaning that we would be collecting the funds. These improvements aren't scheduled till summer of 2018. The funds would stay in the adjacent ways account, and we could use them to offset the next modernization project.
Okay, and then when you say that that the design is to change the vehicular flow, that is not, or is that more for safety or for aesthetics, or how do we come up with this need to change the parking lot?
President Fisher, Ms. Ordway, it's more for safety, and it's from input from the initial input that we received from the school that this is a need that needs to be corrected.
Okay, thank you.
And was there any code issues as well, or?
Yeah, President Fisher,
Okay.
there are, in the case of Arrowhead Elementary, there are a couple drive approaches that are too close together, so there's a new code requirement as to the distance of where drive entrances, how far apart they need to be. And so we think that that's going to be part of the improvements. Again, we have not had the conversations with the city, so I can't say that definitively, but we think that is likely going to be part of what's included in this $400,000 projection.
So if we didn't approve this, do we have the money in the bond to pay for this?
President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, we have $7 million of the bond money for this project.
So is that enough to do the project?
President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, we don't have the design yet, so it's not expected to be enough to fund all of the improvements at this particular campus.
So I guess my question would be somewhat of a follow-up of Ms. Tweedy's question. So if we didn't approve it and the bond then had to pay for the entire project, I guess my question would be what impact would that have on the rest of the project? I mean, obviously you've had $400,000 less to spend. What would we then not do as a result of taking the adjacent ways, the money for that out of the bond?
President Fisher, Ms. Frank, it's difficult to say. Again, we don't have the design, but we would have to scale back the scope of the work. So there'd be $400,000 less that we would, And as we develop the design, we prioritize what is learned from the campus itself. They participate in the design to say, here are the improvements that we need to make. Then we prioritize those, and it's typically, this has happened on every project that we've done. If we give them a $7 million budget, it'll be designed for $8.5 million, and so we have to scale it back to 7, or in the case, if the adjacent ways is not approved, we'd have to scale it back to $6.6 million. So we would just go through that same process, just eliminate something more on in the scope.
And in some of the other modernization projects that might be, similar to the Arrowhead, have you found when you got in to do the work that there were unexpected things that increased the cost of the modernization project? I know, you hear the stories of people go in to renovate a house and discover, the wiring, the electricity's not up to code, or there are things that were not expected that then increase the cost of the project, or has that not been a factor with the modernization projects you've done?
That happens with every one of our projects, even new builds. Some things become unexpected, but more so on the modernization projects, just because you're dealing with a historic building, and certainly things that have evolved over time. That even if they were built one way, they may be unearthed a different way.
Okay.
Ms. Leavitt, did you have a question on this one? Okay, but it's a public hearing, so we need to give her the opportunity to question. It's on the previous one, though?
Yeah, the previous topic, the teacher-only legislative pay plan.
Let's go ahead and have Ms. Tweedy, let's finish this conversation, then
That's what
we'll
I
go
was
back
doing.
to that one.
Okay.
Tweedy?
Could you just, Mr. Miglorino, help me understand, and maybe this is the way it's always done? What is the rationale behind increasing the taxes and then finding out how much it's going to cost, as opposed to finding out how much it's going to cost and then deciding if we need to increase the taxes?
President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, the timing of the project and having the funds available to do the work would necessitate us to make the decision today, even though we don't have the design. So we're making an informed estimate or a projection of the cost based on information that we know from doing these projects, like projects at other schools, and so the money needs to be available to us to be able to do the work. So we need to make the decision now. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg type of situation. If the board doesn't want the adjacent ways to be included, we need to know that as we go into the design phase, and know that we're dealing with a complete budget of $7 million versus $7.4 million. But when these projects were developed and built into the bond programming, it was always contemplated that there would be a component for adjacent ways. It does require the board to approve that, though.
I mean, I guess for me, it would have been helpful, but I mean, I know it's too late now, if I saw the plan and understood the rationale and the need for raising people's taxes. I think the plan would come first, but that's just me. But I didn't understand this completely till today, and so I take some responsibility. I don't.
The one thing that just to comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if you, we have a plan today, but we have to have the time to collect the tax, which is of course of the year, which is why we do it a year in advance. Next year, the rate, whatever the cost of our supplies, the cost of labor, the cost of the project, potentially could increase. So I think that, that's how it was explained to me when I inquired earlier. Was that they get the money first, they plan on it, they project and they plan, because it takes the year to collect the adjacent ways. Now, the one other question I do have, though, is, can the adjacent ways for anything other than adjacent ways projects?
President Fisher, no, it cannot.
Because I've never worked with adjacent ways before. because I don't want to collect a tax that we're not going to use for its intended purpose. And my concern, if we don't, we've determined that this year's adjacent ways is less than last year's adjacent ways, so our tax base is not going to go up. If we don't remain steady, or at least in the ballpark, and then next year we have to go for adjacent ways, our taxpayers then are going to feel a change or see it. That's just my stance on it. I'm just, if I'm understanding our conversation correctly. Any other questions on this item?
I have one other question. So we have the Arrowhead modernization project, and so then if this adjacent ways were to be approved, is there another, and forgive me if I should know this and I don't, is there another modernization project coming up so that then we would be approving adjacent ways again the following year? What does that schedule look like?
President Fisher, Ms. Frank, so the modernization schedule looks like after Arrowhead, we have 2 more schools to do,
Okay.
and that is Bel Air and Hillcrest, and I think in that order is the way we have it established right now. Not that certainly is subject to change, but pending the board's approval of that. But yes, we would, again, when we contemplated each of these modernization projects, we thought that there would be a component of adjacent ways in the budget, or we would have increased the amount for each school to have it all-inclusive in the bond. The one benefit of doing it via the adjacent ways, again, just a pros and cons type thing. It's a tax either way, but if it was put on the bond itself, then you would be paying it over time. The adjacent ways is levied in that year and for that amount, as opposed to paying it out like a mortgage, which is kind of an analogy or a parallel to our bond payment. So
in that respect, there actually is a benefit to the taxpayer to paying for the adjacent ways out of the adjacent ways levy.
there definitely is.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rincarino, for answering our questions. We're going to go back to the teacher because we do have one public comment. State your name for the record.
Yep. Maria Leyva, President of Deer Valley Education Association. So regarding the teacher-only legislative pay, has there been a definite decision, or what is the plan, or is the definition of teacher to be receiving these funds? I mean, I know we talked about those on phased retirement plan this coming year, but do we know what fits, or has there ever been a discussion? Are we using the classroom site fund definition of teacher? Is it anybody with a teaching certificate? Do we know that definition, and who's eligible for this pay?
So those are great questions, and the classroom site fund definition is probably the easiest one to respond to, but it's any teacher that was paid out of Function 1000. We also have, we occasionally have other, like paraprofessionals that would be paid out of Function 1000 as well. They're not eligible, they're not certified. So our efforts would be to use any teacher, certified teacher that was paid out of Function 1000. And just to be clear, they would have to be paid out of that in both years. So the prior year, now fiscal year 17, that just concluded several days ago, and in fiscal year 18.
Okay, would that also include teachers on assignment working in their practicum for their administrative degree? Or are they paid out of the 1,000 fund? What about the certified teachers who are working out of the district office, like ELD coordinators and things like that? They have teaching certificates. Would they be eligible?
The teachers working at the district office are not paid out of Function 1000.
Okay.
Teachers on assignment at a school, I'm not sure about the practicum part of that comment, but those are not paid out of Function 1000 either.
Okay. Thank you.
Jim, I have Just to follow up on that, so if you're a teacher on assignment and you're teaching a .4 or a .6, you're not counted as a teacher? Just a question, because there are many of the teacher on assignments that still teach classes.
Correct. So the teacher on assignment portion of it would
Uh-huh.
not be coded to 1,000, but their teacher portion, so they're split coded between multiple accounts.
Okay.
So they would get 1.06% of their 1,000 compensate, their
So it would just be
function 1,000.
prorated to match what they're actually in the classroom for.
Correct.
Okay.
So essentially, it would be prorated.
So it doesn't hit their salary, though, it's based on hours, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's based on their FTE, their
Okay.
full-time equivalent, because they're not an hourly, it's not an hourly position, but yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what I meant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll have one more, I think.
So yes, the last one is the adopted expenditure budget. There's a lot of slides here, but not many of them have changed, so I'll go through it quickly. But please slow me down or stop me at any point where you wanted to make a comment. Again, we're still in the public hearing, so we're still taking input. This is just the process that we followed. We are down to the bottom here, scheduled to be considered on July 11th, the official adopted budget. These three financial priorities haven't changed: salary increases for all employees, maintaining some limited capital funding, and managing our structural deficit. The override continues at 15%. The 1.31% inflation, thanks to the settling of that lawsuit. Current year funding provisions are included. The ongoing Proposition 123 funding is here. The 1.06%, which is a little over $1.3 million. $1.4 million in results-based funding. That's an estimate because we don't know exactly how much that's going to be. And then carry forward at about $1.2 million. The staffing standards remain the same. District additional assistance, the state imposed reduction continues. I think this gets overlooked in some instances, but we talk a lot about what Prop 123 or 123 did for us and how much money it brought into our district. We still, again, have a $13.4 million reduction in next year's budget that's actually formula-based. That's statutorily the state would pay to us, but if it weren't for them continuing that reduction. We do have, an increase in the amount of cash accounts. We had 1.7, a little over 1.7 million in fiscal year 17. We're up to $3.1 million in fiscal year 18. So net impact is the budget went down from 200 million to just under $200 million. We spent a lot of time talking about this before, so we made some changes to the, again, remember, I made these terms up, so I'll take ownership of them. Inclusions, the things that are in the budget. And one thing that we moved here is we moved the make-whole provision for the phased retirement teachers into the 1.06 because that plan has now at least been developed. It has not been formally approved, but it is in the budget that way. And we made the changes to the science warehouse, including the facilities apprentice reclassification, science warehouse clerk position, and food and nutrition reclassifications, and then the remaining items were left on the reservation list. And as I've indicated here, this is further information is required before bringing these back to the board. And so I tried to indicate here what we believe is necessary to bring back to the governing board before these can even be considered moving forward. So the technology cost comparison and a position study of IS&T positions of our comparable districts before the IS&T reclassifications can be reconsidered is what's outstanding there. On the behavior flight team and pilot program, a special education support plan, a plan to support special education might be better stated. The community education, the history of the reclassifications, there was some question about what had transpired over at least the last year. And then the justification for the need, the volume and those types of things that we spoke about. And likewise for the all other non-M&O funded reclassifications. I would suggest that Many of these items might be things that could be discussed at I know there's a board retreat that might be in the planning stages, a future work session or study session, or even a future board meeting. When this information gets gathered, we'll be sure to share it with the board and then await further direction for these things to be considered. Again, we're not moving forward with these things at this point in time until we can gather the information here. And if there's something that you want to see specifically for any of these 4 items, we would certainly welcome that input so that we can make sure that we meet the expectations of the board before developing something that doesn't hit the mark. I'm going to pause here for a minute.
Looks to me like you did everything you've been asked, so.
Okay.
Is there any questions? Ms.
Okay.
O'Brien? Okay. I see no public comments, so I think can I get a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
So moved. Oh.
No, she's talking.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are going to turn right around and go. Call the regular meeting of the governing board. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show all board members are present. Ms. O'Brien is telephonic. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda with the following changes, that we move item 9B to after number 5, and that we also remove items 8A and 8G from the consent agenda for separate consideration.
Can I get a second? Okay, I'll second it. All those in favor? Yes, ma'am. 8A and 8G. A as in apple, G as in
George.
George. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? I didn't hear any yet.
Okay. Oh, we're moving to...
We have no awards and achievements tonight. Go ahead and move to 9.
Find 9B. My book, yeah, but I've got all these papers here to shuffle through. It makes me feel important. Okay, here we go. I found it. All right, I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation for the principal at Desert Sage Elementary School, Christy Gill.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Moffett.
We would like to introduce to the audience Christy Gill. She comes to us from Scottsdale, and also I see that many of her staff members are here.
Okay. So, we haven't approved her yet, but
And Christy was selected for many, many reasons. Among those are her instructional background, her professional development knowledge, her language immersion background as well, and just her perfect fit for this campus.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Can we clap now?
Welcome to Deer Valley. Okay, governing board reports. Ms. O'Brien. Ms. Ordway.
Well, let's see. Welcome, Dr. Finch. Welcome to all of our new administrators. Oh, especially you who are getting flowers now. I appreciate the fact that you all have been dying to immerse yourself in the Deer Valley culture, processes, and you're preparing for the students that are coming in. Just to take a look around the district with projects that are being done, One might notice that Deer Valley High School has some new colors. There's freshly painted blacktop, carpet. So I guess we're on our way to opening day, even though some of us don't want to believe that August 7th, well, that's the beginning of school, is just around the corner. So thank you for your work, your hard work over the summer.
Sweetie.
Welcome, Dr. Finch. And I had one agenda request.
Okay.
I was hoping on a future agenda, sooner than later, that we could put to discuss our process for bringing addenda items forward so that we can all get on the same page. I guess I would like this done kind of quickly because I'm not comfortable with approving the addendas that are coming before me with the current process. So, thank you.
And I would second Ms. Tweedy's request.
Okay, Ms. Frank, board report, or just that's it?
Welcome, Dr. Finch. That's it for my report.
Okay, for my board report, I do want to also welcome Dr. Finch. But I want to give a special thank you to Ms. Frank, who, amidst a family tragedy for me, took over the last meeting with virtually no notice, and I believe I did watch from the hospital, and you did a wonderful job. And I also want to thank Ms. Tweedy for her efforts to support Ms. Frank as requested. I know it's difficult when you maybe are not allowed to do what you've been requested to. So, but I do appreciate your efforts, and I appreciate all the support to Ms. Frank. The last thing I want to do is wish, at my district, we started our administrative welcome backs today. So I just, and it's such an exciting time. I just really want to give encouragement to the administration of Deer Valley as you start going into that season, and just find that happy place to start the year. I know you always do, but even when you think it doesn't count, or oh, this is a lot of work to put these things together, sometimes you leave and you got to touch base with that principal, or you got to touch base with the AP or something, and there is a very big benefit to it. So anything that I can do to support you in your efforts to put that together, I'm more than willing. If you want us to come in and just kind of wave at people, maybe let the board know. I think it's a good effort for us to be able to start joining and uniting all areas of the district. And perhaps next year, if we can talk Dr. Finch into coordinating a convocation, because I really enjoy the one we do at Phoenix Union. So that's it for my board report. Dr. Finch, you're on.
No current events, only being here a week and a half. But I want to say thank you for the warm welcome, and the Deer Valley family's been great. Every person I've run into has been super helpful and very friendly, and we have a top shelf administrative team, and I'm excited to work with them. So with this team, with that team, we should be able to make some noise. So looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Make sure you're talking into the microphone. People are doing this. Like we can't hear.
They do it to me all the time. All right.
They do it to everybody.
yeah.
So.
Data analysis. Scott, I'm assuming that's you.
Thank you. Good evening, President Fisher, members of the governing board. It's my pleasure to bring to you some of our state testing results. Tonight we're going to talk about AZ Merit, AIM Science, and Azella. As you know, there are a couple of other state tests, including CTE and the civics test, which we've presented at other times, or will present at other times. This data, for the most part, is fairly fresh, fairly newly unembargoed, except for the AIM Science data, of course. And so this is kind of going to be a number slash results dump or share with you as we're just starting now to delve into them and generate action steps as we go forward. So starting with AZ Merit results, and again, well, not again, but let me apologize. I wish I had this to you earlier so you had a chance to look at it and look through the different schools' results and the numbers. So I will let you know, please, as we go through this probably fairly quickly tonight and you take it away, please come back with any ideas, suggestions, thoughts, concerns as we look at the data. So this is all of the K-6 schools in our district on their AZ Merit math results for 3 years. So now we have 3 years of AZ Merit, so we can get trends. And you can see that the overall trend on the far right there's an upward trend, so that's a good thing. Maybe not as high as we want it to be, but we're moving in the right direction, and I believe we will continue to move in the right direction. 12 of these 15 schools also have a positive trend, and a couple of them with a slight drop over last year's test. These are all of the K-8 schools. Again, you can see on the far right a positive trend overall for K-8, and also middle school is included on here. And so 9 of the 14 K-8 schools also have a positive trend, and you have a couple of mixed trends. I think you have one drop, one with a drop. So some very nice results here, especially I look at something like Sonora Foothills with an 81% overall proficiency in their math proficiency. This is now ELA for all of our K-6 schools, and I'm going to keep the same theme here. Overall, a positive trend, a pretty good positive trend on the far right, and you can see, kind of a number of schools with positive trends. Number of schools, almost many of the schools increasing, even if it's a mixed trend. But then you do have some mixed trends. I don't think there's any decreasing trends in this group. And this is now K-8, same story, so I'll change my story in a minute, but positive trend across all of the K-8 schools for their ELA results. 10 of the 13 K-8 schools also have a positive trend, and Hillcrest Middle School has a positive trend from the 3 middle schools, with the others mixed. Cruising now, here's the high schools, both math and ELA on this page, math in the green, ELA in the blue. Both of them also have positive trends, and for the most part, the high school results have positive trends. You see a couple on the ELA and one on math that does have kind of a mixed trend, but this is probably still a huge opportunity for us in high school, math and ELA, as we continue to take the assessment more seriously, and as we'll present in a later board meeting, the impact of the AF letter grade process. I think this will become even more important to high schools and hopefully the high school students, and we'll see these numbers move even faster. So I showed you all the school results. I'll show you also the results by the assessment. So there are 9 assessments for both math and ELA. These are the 9 assessments for math, grade 3 through 8, and then Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. Again, overall positive trend with slight drops for, let me see. Actually, all 9, overall positive trend. Most of the assessments has a positive trend, but every assessment went up over last year. So the drop in the trend was last year, and we went up in every single one of the assessments over last year. Good recovery for grades 7 and 8. If you remember what happened in grade 8 last year, 8th graders that were in an end-of-course high school test did not take the 8th grade test. So those smart students who were taking high school courses didn't get a chance to affect our 8th grade results. So we had a drop. We also had a slight drop in 7th grade last year, but both of them recovered very well. And this is important, just as 6th grade was the year before. This was an area that our curriculum instruction assessment team focused on for the school year last year. So it's nice to see those bumps happening. Here's the ELA results. Again, positive trend overall, but you see drops now in a couple more grades. In 5 of these grade level tests, from 3rd grade to 11th grade did have a mixed trend, but overall still a positive trend for our ELA assessments. A couple of things that are also out there already or getting ready to be populated and posted on our portal page, and I'm sure you've seen many of these in the past, but we have 3 reports that I'm in the midst of developing. One is what I call an interactive result, AZ Merit results, and that will be the first one up there, the 2017 AZ Merit results, where any employee can go in and pull the report and play with the school they want to look at, the assessment they want to look at, a subpopulation they want to look at, and see what the results are. And you can compare to the schools you want to compare to, or a region, or to, say, all high schools, or to all Title I schools. And it's really a nice little document or tool that schools can use to really kind of see, okay, where are we? They can see their levels now. They can see their trends that you just seen, and now they can start comparing to other schools. So we get that whole let's see process going of continuous improvement. There's also a report I generate that does the same thing, but with the mastery level. If you remember with AZ Merit, we don't get standard level data. We only get level at the 3 kind of high level mastery levels. So it is limiting in kind of really how much you can use the data, but at least there's that one level to drill down. And then finally, I do the same thing with writing point charts. They get points for each of their writing, for their writing prompt in 3 areas. So I do it for that also. There are a couple of other files that aren't available yet just because of the process with the state and what we're going through with AF letter grades and how we're going to set cuts and everything else, but they will come out sometime in the future. That first of all is the AF letter grade data, which will show student growth percentiles and student growth to target and all sorts of chronic absenteeism and all of the components of the AF letter grades. That is still embargoed. There is some data out there that shows some of those components, but to share that data is still embargoed. And it looks like it's going to probably be about late September before it will be embargoed, so quite a long time. Another thing, a file that comes out, just a raw file of state, county, LEA, and school data. This is a nice file because then we can quickly go in and we can start comparing ourselves to some of our benchmark schools, our peer schools, and even charter schools when we have all that data. And we'll do that as soon as that data comes out. And then the third file on there are roster files. I generate a file that has student level AZ Merit results for all the kids a teacher had last year and for all the kids a teacher has this year. So they can, one, reflect on how what they did last year and how their students did, and 2, they can now start plan better for where their students are coming in. I got to get those out quick because, as we all know, this data gets kind of stale really fast as you come in the first, second, third, fourth week of school. Okay, now they're on. You're moving on because you know more about them than even this data can tell you. So we're trying to get those out really quick. Yeah, go ahead.
And this could be for Dr. Galligan or for you, Dr. Smith. Is it too early to tell if there is a correlation between the Arizona Career and Readiness Standards and the curriculum that we've designed that the Algebra 1 and 2 scores have gone so high? It seems as though more of the kids, from just reading the graph, that they actually are understanding the algebra instead of struggling so much.
Yeah, President Fisher, Ms. Ordway, a kind of a mixed answer in my mind, although that was a focus area for the CIA team. When you bring it down to the standard level, you can say maybe overall for all the standards together, but we don't get the data at a standard level on the AZ Merit test, so it's really hard to
I was
analyze.
just wondering, since we changed the standards, if there was any way we could figure out if they were actually helping the kids learn more and retain it. So, silly thought.
Right. A couple of my observations. These are Scott Smith's personal observations, and you can take away others as you look at the data. 31 of our schools improved math proficiency rates, while 25 improved their ELA. All 9 grade level math assessments you saw had improvement, but only 5 of the ELA had improvement. I want to put probably some shout outs to some of the schools that I thought did a great job. Village Meadows and Constitution improved their ELA and math scores at the highest rate in the district. Their ELA scores went up 12% and 9% respectively, and their math scores went up 12% and 10% respectively. So there's a huge shout out to those Title I schools with the biggest bump in their overall proficiency. And finally, Sonora Foothills, I already pointed that out in the graphs, had the highest math proficiency of 81%, and Legend Springs had the highest ELA proficiency of 81%. So a little shout out to those schools. One more observation, which I showed you last year, so I wanted to show again this year. Last year, Title I schools as a group closed the gap in both math and ELA. This year, they closed the gap some more in ELA, but the math gap widened slightly. And you can see the hard graph to read unless you're used to looking at it. I'm used to looking at it, but if you look at the Title I math versus the non-Title I math and the Title I ELA versus the non-Title I ELA, you can see how close those Title I schools as a group are to the non-Title I schools, which is one of our goals, is to close those gaps, and you can see how close they really are. Next is AIM Science. I'm probably going to go through these a little quicker and again let you digest some of the information and then ask me questions. This is 4th grade for all the K-6 schools, first of all, and so you can see that overall the trend on the right again is improving, but there's some huge observations on this one that I think pop out to you if you look closely. If you look at Bel Air, or if you look at Esperanza, if you look at New River, just those changes over the last year, they went up 24%, 27%, and 22% respectively in their science scores. So I haven't figured that out yet, but maybe it's something we will figure out as we go forward in the very near future. Okay. This is now 4th grade for all the K-8 schools. Again, overall upward trend, and probably the thing that pops out on here is Norterra Canyon, bumping up to 12% to 92% proficiency, challenging Sierra Verde there on the overall top proficiency for 4th grade at K-8 schools. This is 8th grade K-8 schools. You can see on the far right, this is the one that has the mixed trend. So we had a slight drop overall. But I'm not going to focus on that tonight. I'm going to focus on the first 8th grade class ever at Sonoran Foothills, hit 92% proficiency, which is remarkable in my mind. 97, sorry. 97, my slide was blurry. This is probably the not so great news. We have math scores hovering, in the 52 to 55 range over the last several years, last 4 or 5 years, and we'd really like to see a change. And it's also something that CIA is the Curriculum Instruction Assessment team is looking to focus on a little bit, and they have started to focus on with their specialist in CIA. But you can see 4 of the 5 schools dropped. We'll do a shout out since she's here to Deer Valley High School on this one for improvement in their science assessment scores. Finally, Azella, the Arizona English Language Learners Assessment, and I'm probably going to really let you digest this one on your own. This is an interesting way to present the results, but we do it on purpose, and we did it the same way last year. There are 4 items on here. The green bars are the total assessed number of students on the left-hand scale, okay, and then the blue bars are those that scored proficient at the end of the year, the number. The yellow bars are the number that at least went up a level in their Azella testing. So you look at the blue, some got to proficient, and then look at the yellow, then some more at least moved up a level in their proficiency, and then the red dot is the proficiency rate, the proficiency percentage on the right-hand scale. The reason we show it this way is because you can get really high proficiency rates with a really small number of kids. So if you see a dot that says, wow, they're at, most schools are moving, in the 10, 20, 25% range proficiency, and you see a dot that says 60 or 70, then you want to look down and say, well, how many kids was it? Well, it was 5 kids or 4 kids, like most of our schools have. So if I were to read these graphs, or would encourage you to read these graphs, I'd say look at the green bar and then look at the red dot. I got a lot of kids. I want to know how many of them are becoming proficient. So this is the K-6 schools. Here are the K-8 schools. You can see, and the schools with a lot of kids we know with EL populations are here Paseo Hill pops out. We know they have a high EL population, and here are the middle schools and high schools. So I know that was quick. That was really quick on the Azella, but I'm going to let you again digest it. So this data is fairly fresh, and we are just now starting to process it and really start to understand it, and we still have all the growth information. We'll be sharing with administrators all of this data at next Monday at the administrator conference. We've already had a public request for the data, so I wanted to make sure I at least got it to you. So we got it out to you. You could see it before it started to go public. And the Arizona Republic's going to compile as much as they can and put out a file for people. So I want to make sure you saw it before it went too far. And we're going to begin working on right away. Do you have any questions?
Are there any extenuating factors that we need to know about for anything that dropped? Gail, anything that you can think of? Where we did see drops, is there anything extenuating that, oh, we changed this or something?
President Fisher, that will be something that when the curriculum instruction and assessment specialists come back and we have this data before us, we'll be taking a look at each of those content areas, each of the grade levels, and at each campus. What we do tend to do, though, is we identify the campuses that are going to need support based on either a decrease or look at those campuses that had significant increases and identify teachers that we can then utilize as model classrooms.
And
We'll
you
be doing
focus
that.
on the campuses that perhaps dropped in both?
Yes.
I'm just double checking. I know you do. But any other questions? Okay. We're moving on to old business.
Item 7A, I move that the governing board select an option and approve the minutes for the special and regular governing board meetings on June 13th, 2017.
Second.
Okay, discussion. I did watch the meeting online, like I said. One of my concerns with making this adjustment to the minutes where we just note a time, and I did ask legal counsel to let us know. Did we share that with the board? Whether or not, what is the official minutes, and it technically could be either. My concern is not this administration and not this administrative assistant, but in the past, we've had audio turned off, audio go missing, audio, the accusation was cut. I don't believe it was ever determined it was, but things have happened with our audio. And for that reason, I personally am not comfortable with simply referencing our audio in our written minutes. When we do not adopt the audio, we adopt the written minutes. If we were to want to do it in the way that we're just referencing a point in a audio, we would have to have some, well, number one, in my opinion, we'd have to have some way to ensure that the audio isn't going to be cut off, turned off. I believe we've had meetings where the recorder has just died, the batteries have died, things like that. And I believe we would have to adopt the audio as well as the written minutes. So that is my concern, which is why I had asked that we look at whether or not it's legal for us to do that and whether or not it's prudent to do that. Ms. Frank.
Well, I do have a comment. When this came before us at the last board meeting and the suggestion or request was made that we replace writing out the board reports with referencing the audio, the reason given for that was to decrease an employee's workload, which, I'll be honest, sounded reasonable to me when the request was made, but then when we voted on the minutes, they were voted down so that that employee then had to go back and revise the minutes, which didn't seem to me that it was decreasing anybody's workload, and I had concerns that there were some inconsistencies with the stated objectives.
Well, if we're gonna have to listen to the minutes to find that point and
Right.
mark, that point marker where they know it's this many minutes in.
Well, since I made the request, I'd like to explain what the request was. The request and the rationale behind it is not to have an hourly person, Ms. Redding at this moment, try to paraphrase and decide what our intonation was and what we were talking about, how to pick the words wisely and choosily and politically correct. It also would cut down her workload, as she would listen to board reports starting with whoever starts, she marks a minute. There was, I believe, one time that there was part of a meeting that wasn't recorded, and that was 8 seconds. So it's not something that has happened over and over again, and that is the history of the board. We also have live stream, where the words can be taken off of that. What my concern is that at this moment, it's Kim Redding, is put in the position to decide what we meant when we said what we meant, what our tone was, what our meanings were, and it just doesn't seem that she should sit there and try to paraphrase what we're saying. So your words that from the last minutes, I didn't agree that that was something that portrayed really what was said. Ms. Frank did. So I'm sure that within an audience, within the 1,000 or however many people we have that listen to the live stream, when they read those minutes, her interpretation of what was said may not be what they heard. So the most accurate and efficient way is to have the actual words be available as the record. And I don't know when you checked with legal, but it would have been a great thing for the rest of the board to have been privy to the fact that you were checking to see if an audio and or audio visual was something that could be used as the record.
It was shared, was it not? No, it wasn't an official legal.
Well,
It wasn't an official legal opinion, and that was with Dr. Weitenheimer, so I can't express to you why he did not share that. Have to ask him. But it
Well,
was
I
the
don't-
email was sent. But the one thing I would like to say is, and I know it's happened multiple times where I've been asked, here's what I put, is this what you, and so I've been asked if it fits what I was saying. I don't know if anyone else has. I don't believe, the minutes are not verbatim. We did have a discussion year before last that it would not be reasonable to have someone actually dictate the minutes to be verbatim. But we do have to adopt legal minutes.
and so what is illegal about what was proposed?
Well, we would have to adopt the minutes. So if we are
But
going
we-
to simply put a time in,
Uh-huh.
then we would have to adopt
But
the
is
audio
that
as
what
well.
your,
And we would also have to, and my concern remains if that recording is missing. That's
is
my
that,
concern.
but is that your assumption or is that actually the legal opinion?
No, we were sent, it was in our Friday update, and it says that we have to have minutes and adopt minutes.
Correct, but,
And it says we can do audio or written.
correct,
And we can do both.
correct.
But
So
they have to be adopted. It does, that is in what we were sent.
So
We were
what-
sent it in the Friday update.
right, but so what would be the burden of adopting?
It wouldn't. I'm just simply stating we
Yeah,
would have
okay.
to adopt both. But my concern again would be that the audio goes missing.
And
Or a
then the live
battery
stream too?
dies, or
And the live stream would go missing too?
we're not adopting the live streaming. We're making this much hairier than it is, and I'm not really sure I understand the reason. I'm fine with our minutes the way they've been done historically.
Ms.
That is
Tweedy
my
has a
stance.
comment or a question.
Just a second, Darcy. Just a second, Ann. I am fine with the minutes as they've always been done. That's my opinion. Ms. Tweedy, your comment.
I would like to go back to Ms. Frank's point. I'm completely confused as to what the real motive here is, because at the last meeting, it was stated that we were trying to reduce Ms. Redding's workload, which sounded reasonable to me as well. And then the suggestion was made to adopt those minutes and then maybe move forward on this suggestion, which would have reduced Ms. Redding's workload. But then those minutes failed to pass, so Ms. Redding had to do extra work when we were trying to adopt something so that she could do less work. It seems to me that there might be a motive here, and maybe I'm off base, that we're going to start editorializing each other's comments in the board minutes, which I think is a situation we don't want to get into, because I don't always agree with what other members say on the dais. And if I go back and try to reselect the word choices in the minutes, we could just spend every board meeting debating our minutes for hours, and that's going to be not probably the best use of anyone's time.
Ms. O'Brien. Well, we have to select, so I need a motion to select one of the sets of minutes, but it has to specifically select one. There's option A where we are not just putting the minutes in, and there's option B where we're just putting the minutes in. I mean the time in.
So option A, let me clarify. It says option A are the original submitted minutes, and option B are the requested format utilizing the audio-video recording. So I move that we adopt option A, the original submitted minutes.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. For those opposed?
Nay.
That's 3-2. Okay. Move on with 7B.
Okay, item 7B. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve a coding program for students to be developed during the 2017-18 school year.
Second.
President Fisher, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests. As shared last week in the board update, we provided possible costs for the computer science education across all school level configurations over the next 3 years. You also have a copy of the documents at the dais. The breakdown of costs is based on the 4 categories used in prior computer science documents, that is staffing, technology, delivery, and enrichment. Information is provided for configurations 912, 78, K6, and a draft budget summary. All numbers are projections based on our best knowledge of possible costs at this time.
President Fisher, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests. Expanding the use of technology so that we can transform student learning experiences to increase opportunities for students to think critically, work collaboratively, and thrive in today's and tomorrow's society is of utmost importance for our children. Technology, thoughtfully used, can take education to new levels. By 2020, the United States will have 1.4 million computer science jobs and only 400,000 computer scientists to fill them per estimates from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The U.S. Labor Department predicts that tech jobs will grow faster than the average for all jobs at a rate of 12% this decade. But it's not just hiring demand that makes this industry one to watch. U.S. News & World Report's best technology jobs of 2017 are also high-paying jobs that boast low unemployment rates. However, learning computer science is not just about producing a labor force of computer programmers and web developers. Much more significantly, learning computer science and computational thinking help students develop systemic thinking skills for problem solving, practice logical deduction, and learn to express themselves with greater precision and clarity. To be clear, the proposal before you this evening is not a program for a select population of students, but for a curriculum sequence to provide all students equitably with frameworks to think critically about and better understand the world in which they live.
President Fisher, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests, in your materials, you have a document which lists the action steps for implementing computer science education at each grade band, K-6, 7, 8, and high school. As mentioned before, you also have a budget projection with a good faith estimate of the costs involved to carry out each of the action steps within the categories of staffing, technology, delivery, and enrichment. As shared by Google education evangelist Jamie Cassip at the recent DVUSD Summer Tech Fest, there are several key drivers for implementing computer science education in schools. He noted that as education shifts to performance-based assessments, we can create educational experiences that are practical, iterative, and focused on continuous improvement experiences that can be measured for iteration, innovation, and sustained incremental progress. Exposure to computer technology is vital to building student confidence for computer science learning. Academic exposure builds interest and competency in computer science, and Black and Hispanic students face discrepancies in access and exposure to CS classes and to computer use at home and school. Computer science education has been offered and is growing at several DVUSD campuses across grade levels as seen here. While our district is quite proud of current opportunities at our schools, DVUSD has much work to accomplish equitable offerings for all students and a unified approach across grade bands and campuses. We have seen robust enrollment at several of our schools that promote digital learning experiences. In light of this, schools with lower enrollment and underserved populations are looking to increase computer science learning opportunities to boost enrollment, especially in our K-8 schools. As a unified district, building student skills in computer science, technology, and coding before high school will allow students to draw upon their experiences and possible interest in expanding their skills at the secondary level in areas such as coding and software development.
To address the concern regarding ongoing costs, the funding proposal as outlined uses multiple financial sources, includes initial investments that will benefit students and school communities long term. This is an investment in our future, both in our students and financially, much like the investment our district made with full-day kindergarten. The Computer Science Education Committee members that were made up of business leaders, community members, teachers, administrators, along with student input, felt it important to ensure we had purposeful action steps that would enable DVUSD to compete with other Valley school districts in providing a robust computer science experience. To address one of the concerns mentioned earlier, the goal is to ensure there is dedicated staff at each level, K-6 special area teachers, 7-8 exploratory teachers, and high school CTE teachers, thereby decreasing the concern of added work of general education teachers. The added support will also provide an advantage for teachers who are ready and eager to infuse digital learning opportunities within their classrooms. To address another concern regarding programs, we offer programs that are targeted to specific student populations, such as Read 180 and Math 180 for our students who have gaps in reading and literacy, language immersion for those students who are interested in world language, Deer Valley online programming for those students who want to take advantage of an online environment, early childhood, both in fee-based programs, Head Start programs, and our developmental programs, our alternative school at Vista Peak, just to name a few. We will review these programs in place to determine if our investment is beneficial to students and the overall DVUSD community. Similar to reading, math, and science, and other content areas, computer science provides core knowledge and skills with the Arizona Educational Technology Standards. However, computer science is much more than just another subject. It can serve as the glue for interdisciplinary study, which means the time we spend on it is not added, it's integrated. For students just entering school, Teaching computer science is about giving them the thinking skills that will help them become proactive learners and citizens, as opposed to just consumers of information and knowledge in a world that is increasingly influenced by the manipulation of digital bytes. The most important part of teaching computer science is its ability to encourage and support creative expression and problem solving in our students. Tonight, we are asking you to approve the Computer Science 2017-18 initial funding for the planning and development of a curriculum sequence and identification of computer and campus opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, in the information we received, it said part of it would be funded by campus M&O in the amount of 6,000. Is that 6,000 per campus?
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, those options would be basically campus choice. If they wanted to build opportunities for maker spaces, if they wanted to build opportunities for field trips to computer science businesses, if they wanted to build additional outside of school activities like that, that will always be, at this point in time, a campus-based choice. So what we tried to do is just identify what would be a typical cost to build a makerspace environment, or to take a group of children on a field trip, or to provide a club atmosphere after school or before school. And so that cost, we looked across middle, elementary, not so much high school, but really our elementary and middle, and felt that that would be a cost that could fluctuate from a low upward to that high. So it really is going to be
Are they going to have their
campus choice.
M&O dollars reduced, or they choose if they want to reduce their M&O money? I don't understand.
This would not be a reduction of M&O money. It would be a campus choice to spend funds, whether it's from M&O or cash accounts or CIT funds, on those enrichment opportunities.
Are there going to be any costs that the campuses have to incur out of their school budgets to support this program?
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, at this time, we have not identified a cost that a campus would absolutely have to spend on their own. It will always, at this point in time, be a campus choice, because all of theirs is really in that enrichment and those additional opportunities that they may choose to provide children. For example, Sierra Verde provides a club for girls in middle school, and they provide that club through their own monies, but that is that campus's choice.
Okay, then I saw $0 to $5,000 for a needs assessment. What's a needs assessment? How are we defining that, and has a needs assessment already been done for this program?
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, no, a needs assessment has not been done. What we have done is simply look at our campuses from elementary, middle, and high school who have begun to offer computer science programming, whether it's through a club or exploratories in STEM, or through their CTE programming at high school. The needs assessment, each of our campuses will need to do a needs assessment to look at their staffing, their technology that's available to them to utilize in classes, as well as the enrichment opportunities that they would like to explore to offer students at whatever grade levels they've identified at their campus for enrichment opportunity. So this next year really is each campus's planning and development year to implement computer science programming across their grade levels. Our goal here is simply to ensure that we have a unified and equitable approach so that children who are in, say, our Title I schools have equitable access as children who are in our higher socioeconomic campuses.
So do we have evidence? Well, I guess a few things. So the program we're proposing, how do we know it's going to result? How do we know it's going to produce the desired outcome? Do we have research to support that?
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, those will definitely be outcome measures that will be developed as we work through it. We have basic measures that the computer science education team identified globally, but when we look specifically at preschool, elementary, middle, and high school, we will have operational measures that will be part of how we identify if we are making significant progress to ensuring that kids have computational thinking and coding skills.
Well, okay, you go.
Ms. Frank?
So, getting back to the needs assessment, if you can help me understand sort of the timeline here, why would you not do a needs assessment prior to the work on the development of the program?
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Frank, last year was our year for the computer science committee made up of those stakeholders that we mentioned to look at our district globally, as well as look at districts in Arizona and across the nation on how they were implementing computer science. To be able to do a significant needs assessment that includes the planning and identification of where each school currently is, as well as where we would want them to go, in addition to providing curriculum and a progression of learning that flows across pre-K through 12, that all seamlessly comes together for us this next year.
So out of the 100,000 that you're asking us to approve, are the needs assessment going to be funded out of the money that we could potentially approve for you tonight? Or is that a separate?
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Frank, that is part of that 97,000, yes. That will not be at a campus expense.
Well, my understanding, Dr. Galligan, of a needs assessment is it takes place before you fund a program, and you identify the problem, which it sounds like you have, and then you get some kind of theoretical or research-based support that your solution is likely to work and be worth the investment. You don't allocate $100,000 and then do a needs assessment to prove that what you're going to do is a good idea. You do the needs assessment first to determine that what you're going to spend your money on is a good idea.
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, you're correct. We did a needs assessment at a global district level. That is what this past year's committee looked at and identified that in Deer Valley, we do not have a progression of learning for computer science. We are not unified in the approaches that campuses are taking, and nor do we have the vast majority of our campuses offering any type of computer science. And we do have an equity issue in that our Title I schools, as opposed to our higher socioeconomic schools, are not having equitable offerings in computer science. So as at a global level district, yes, we have done a district level needs assessment, but each campus will need to do their own individual assessment. For example, Sierra Verde and Legend Springs are far further ahead. Canyon Springs, as well as being a STEM academy, is also further ahead than, say, Mirage or even another one of our campuses that would like to, let's say Desert Mountain, who would like to explore computer science as a way to entice families and children to come to their campus. So when we look at individual campus needs assessments, that is what the thrust of this next year's work will be.
I could. I think the assessment is being interpreted differently. The need assessment for the program, the need assessment for our students that we need this type of thing has been done. That legwork has been done.
Okay, what evidence do we have that this
what-
curriculum's going to produce? We don't even know what our outcomes are. Or is our outcome just to have it at the school or to have it? I don't understand what we're saying this is going to do.
The outcome is a student who's tech rich and is capable of doing these tasks.
Okay,
It's
so how
like-
would you determine a student's tech rich?
That's not even the stage that this is. This is getting it started. I guess I'm confused with what your
Well,
question
no,
is.
when you design a program that succeeds, you know what it's going to achieve, what you want it to achieve. You have some idea as to what it would look like if it was successful. Saying we don't offer it at certain schools and we need to. I mean, we also don't offer Mandarin at any Title I schools. We don't offer gifted Renaissance programs at any Title schools. If we're going to talk about inequities at Title schools, I think we'd be adding a lot of programs. But, I mean, if that's our goal here, is to have every offering that's at non-Title schools at Title schools, then I mean, that's one thing and that's an obvious outcome. But as a result of doing this, what's going to happen to the students? Why is it a good idea to spend $100,000 on this program today?
President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, obviously one of our outcomes is meeting the Arizona technology standards. That's similar to math, ELA, science, and social studies. So we are bound by Arizona technology standards. So that is one way that we can certainly measure. Another way that we would look at this, we brought to the previous board a definition, a Deer Valley definition for computational thinking, and computational thinking will be another way that we measure how students are able to show what they know and are able to do. We also brought forth to the previous board the Deer Valley definition for computer science, which was based on the pre-K-12 computer science framework. So both of those were brought forward as and approved by a previous board as part of the work that committee did this past year. So when we look at what measures will we use for children, it will be based on the Arizona standards, it will be based on computational thinking, and it will be based on that definition for computer science that is a national framework. That's the beginnings of that. Another part of this next year's work will be the development of that progression of learning and curriculum, as well as those outcomes.
Additional
Yes, Ms.
question.
Frank.
So at previous board meetings, I had mentioned that I wanted to see a long-term plan, and I do appreciate that you've provided that information. So we're looking at year one at roughly $100,000. But as we look at years 2 and years 3, the price tag goes up significantly, and I'm assuming this isn't something that at the end of year 3 we're going to say, well, we've invested all this money, we're not going to do this anymore. So if we're looking at adding, it looks like roughly, and I don't have my calculator with me, $500,000. And when you look at, you broke it out by district M&O, campus M&O, which is where the 6,000 came from that Ms. Tweedy referenced. And then also there was monies coming out of academic services. What fund does academic services come out of? How is that different from district or campus M&O? If I look at year 1, it says $10,000 academic services. How is that funded?
President Fisher, Ms. Frank, I'll be happy to try and answer that. We have an academic services budget that is where there are overlap between responsibilities between various departments. And so there are 3 major funding sources in that academic services budget. One is the classroom site fund, the menu money of the classroom site fund, which is where this $100,000 has now been attributed to for this first year. Another aspect of that happens to be the Instructional Improvement Fund, sometimes referred to as Prop 202, or Indian Gaming Fund. And then we also use some of our title funds, Title II, as well within that academic services budget. Because there's some overlap, we call it the academic services budget because it's a collaboratively developed budget between multiple departments.
Okay, so I think we've all discussed to death what 301 can be spent on. What other things can 202 be spent on?
President Fisher, Ms. Frank, so the Instructional Improvement Fund states anything that would improve the instructional process. So it's pretty vague. So I actually...
That narrows it down, thank you.
Well, it actually, to be more specific, and I'm paraphrasing from statute, it says up to one half of it can be spent on teacher salaries, and we pay, we use exactly 50% of it because that's the maximum we're allowed to pay. This is the other half of the instructional improvement fund. Must be used to improve the instructional practices. That's what it says.
Okay, so the money that's taken from 202, from Prop 202 then could not be spent on something, for example, teacher salaries. Is that correct? You said you're using 50% of that, which is the maximum you're allowed to use.
That is correct.
Can it be used on curriculum and instruction specialists, though, their salaries, because they do professional development?
It could be used on professional development. It could not be used to as a salary increase, you know, or an increase.
If their job was professional development, it couldn't be used there?
I believe it could be used for professional development and for somebody specifically assigned to do professional development.
So then academic services then is a combination, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly, of money from 301, money from 202, and then you said Title I or Title II funds? Okay, all right. And that's why it is in this spreadsheet differentiated from district M&O and school M&O. Okay. So I know that in a previous meeting, you had mentioned that there might be other offsets in the budget to help pay for this, because I'm not just looking at the $100,000 that you're asking for next year. If we approve it so that you can develop this program, then it would be a waste of funds next year to say, oh, but wait, we really can't afford to do the program that we just paid you to develop. So my concern is in year 2 and year 3, the impact to M&O. Along the same lines of other programs that we've implemented, and I'm not going to say, and they're all great programs, but I think we need to be really, really cognizant of the financial difficulties we're facing with declining enrollment, with some of the cuts from the state legislature and the Prop 301, which is going to have to be renewed by voters. Obviously, no one has a crystal ball and knows what's going to happen with that. I wouldn't want us to get ourselves into a bind implementing another program and then finding out, wait, we can't afford this, and we've added it, if that makes sense. I'm not doubting the value of the program, and I'm not doubting the value of making sure that kids at our title schools are receiving the same benefits as a student at a Sierra Verde or a Highland Lakes. I'm just looking at the numbers, looking at year 2 and year 3, and it's a concern for me. So I've shared a great deal of what I think. If there's some response that you have, or
I would like to add a concern the other direction. One of the things that other districts that I've observed recently are doing is increasing things like coding and small specialty schools, and as a result of those actions, they are driving students from other districts to theirs. My concern is if we become the antiquated district that has our kids using an abacus and a pencil versus a tab. I mean, one of the big things, I know that there was concern with using everybody having a one-to-one, and I know there's concern. So there's always a balance between technology and not. But technology is not going away. I'm very tech savvy. I've had an IT career, but I still occasionally will take my cell phone and say, dude, make it work, to one of my children. And that's what parents are looking for, their children. So if I am a parent, I currently am, but if I'm a parent outside of Deer Valley and I'm looking in and I'm seeing, okay, well, Deer Valley does not have a tech program. They do not have the coding. They do not have this. Washington does, or Glendale does. I'm driving my kids to Washington or Glendale because I want them to have a future that begins in young childhood and goes on. So I'm worried the other direction.
So to that point, if I may, I mean, I go to schools all over Maricopa County in my current job, everywhere from Queen Creek to Arlington. I've been to charter schools, private schools. I've been to a lot of schools in this district that have been kind enough to invite me in, and I've been to schools in Chandler all over. We have far more technology in terms of the smart boards, the iPads, than many of the schools and many of the districts I've been in the county. So we are not by any means antiquated in that respect. I have had a couple of teachers that my PowerPoint crashed their laptop, but the stuff that the kids have all runs just fine. So in that regard, I would not see us, based on just sort of a random sample of schools that I've been in, I would not see us as antiquated in that respect in any regard. And I certainly wouldn't want us to fall behind in terms of what the kids need. I guess my big question is 2-3 years out, how are we going to pay for this?
President Fisher, Ms. Frank, we can mince words about this being a program or not, but this is a curriculum and a progression of learning for all students. When we look at many of the programs that we have, they're targeted either for our low learners or our high learners, our youngest learners, our learners who have needs that the middle of the population don't necessarily have. So when we look at is this a program or not, I'd just like to make that distinction. The other thing is when we look at, if you would pull up this chart right here, if you have it, we are really looking at district M&O year 2 at 108,000 and year 3 at 140,000, and that's truly staffing. What Jenna and her team and us, and we'll pull in administrators this year as part of that needs assessment, is looking at our K-6 specials and how we can broaden what the specials are to reduce that possible cost at either our largest K-6, K-8 schools or our smallest that would require us to think about additional FTE for specials. The goal here is to be as cost neutral as is possible, and we've given our best really estimate as to what could happen with enrollment across our schools that are currently lowest and highest. So if we were to say, okay, at this point in time, 108,000 in year 2 is going to be difficult for us. We would have to rethink how we were going to offer specials at that K-6. If we were to take a look at the 140,000 in year 3, we would have to say, okay, how are we going to rethink how we're going to offer that to our students across the campuses that we feel may need that additional FTE at a school. And that'll be conversations that we would have with HR, with Dr. McNeil in ALS and the campuses that are impacted. So I would like to say that we would do our best to be as cost neutral to district M&O as is possible. If you take a look, some of the chunks are in bond funds, some are in CTE Perkins grants and JTED, and those are funds that we have available to us that does not impact M&O that could possibly cause us to have concern looking at teacher compensation, administrator compensation, and exempt compensation.
Ms. Ordway.
With the coding and the technology, one of the goals for teaching the coding is to make the technology something that's usable as a tool, as opposed to just something that sits there that they hunt and peck on.
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Ordway, that would be correct. Rather than our kids just being consumers of knowledge, they become active participants, as well as Ms. Borgeson shared that there is positive information that shows there are jobs that are unfilled currently, and there will be a greater number of jobs, and this is a high need field.
Yeah, I attended Jamie's talk also. However, the most important part about his talk to me was that the earlier this is started in the lower grades, it also does help close the achievement gap, and it also does introduce possibilities to those that are normally not looking at those possibilities. So my fear is that if we do not pass or approve this for you, that we will continue to have STEM academies and we will have schools that are not. STEM academies are not using any specialized, STEM should be in all of our campuses, in my opinion, or STEAM, because we did learn that not only for the technology, but you need the art in it. So I don't think this is something extra that we're throwing in. I believe that this is going to be, or already is, integral to teaching our students in a whole way, and also an important part in closing the achievement gap. And I don't have the statistics tonight, but I know the statistics are out there that will prove that out.
Just real quick before we have any other, double check if Ms. O'Brien, because she's not here to hold up a finger. Ms. O'Brien, do you have any comments before I move on? There's a couple of others that have comments. Since I can't see you, I don't. Okay, Ms. Tweedy has one more comment.
I would just like to ask my fellow board members, we keep adding programs. We don't do outcome evaluations. We say they're going to drive enrollment. We don't get data as to how much the enrollment has increased and what the additional. We can't keep, it's not that there's a thousand things that are needs and great ideas, but we don't demonstrate that actually our program is addressing that need. And so we cannot just afford to keep adding programs. At some point, we need to evaluate these programs and figure out what we can afford. We've got 40 kids in high school classes. We have compensation issues for certified and classified groups. We haven't addressed those. We have staffing issues at the school, and we just keep adopting new curriculums, new resources, and adding new programs. At some point, we have to evaluate these and determine which ones are we're getting a good cost benefit on and which ones we're not, and we need to make some cuts. You can't just keep doing this. Eventually the district's going to be bankrupt and we're not going to be able to afford to pay anybody. I mean, at some point.
I can understand that we do need to do a program evaluation of all programs. One of the big things that, and I know people hate hearing that I work for Phoenix Union, but one of the big things we are doing is looking at all of our programs and seeing what is good, what is not, what are we going to change. That is a longer process that our administrators would need to go through, and prior to having seen it start this year, I had no concept of how much that really is. But we also can't become stagnant to the extent that we're not serving the current kids, because then we lose the enrollment. My concern is that I understand there may be some programs that are a concern, but technology, and I do know we're tech rich and that we have them, but can we use them? And the kids have to be able to use them. I haven't seen anything else in this district to this extent, and this we have talked about for a while. And it may have even started when Mike Gregoire toured Coding Academy, which it's.
But Ms. Fisher, if this
every school that or every thing that I've seen has been pushing us towards a tech rich, and towards not just a tech rich end that we have them, but that our kids can use them, that our kids can take those tech jobs. So I guess the question is, do we want our kids to be engineers and
but you're
coders,
arguing
or
is
janitors.
But you're
Only.
arguing, is there a need for tech-rich kids? And what I'm saying is, I am not saying that there's not a need. What I'm saying is, we need to look at other programs to pay for this. We cannot just keep adding things without finding ways to cut in other areas. This is really fiscally irresponsible.
I would agree that we do need to, but that doesn't mean we stop this until we eventually look. My suggestion would be that we move forward, because this is the planning stage of moving forward with a good and responsible program, and then we say, now we need to look at all programs, because that year 2 and 3 are going to come, and we do have to adjust. Don't just move a program from school to school.
Ms. Fisher, to your point, and also to your point, just to remind you, there have been, and they continue to do, program evaluations to see what is successful. And I don't know that always you can determine which program brought a child in unless someone specifically puts it on their open enrollment or their I'm not leaving your school. So I don't know exactly how accurately that can be measured, but I do know that the technology is useless without those that can utilize it properly. And if our students are not able to utilize it as a tool, then we might as well, it's kind of like having, the big world book. It's pretty, they can use it, but can they use it to the fullest potential? And you did talk about integrating the coding into the different subjects. So I think we've kind of talked this thing to death, so I would ask for the vote also.
Yes, Frank, one last
Yeah,
comment.
I
and
just
then we'll
one
have to
final
vote.
comment, and I don't think it's going to change anybody's minds, but as far as creating or growing engineers and coders, no one goes into engineering unless they have higher level math skills. And when I taught 6th grade science, I had many students who loved my science class and said they wanted to be scientists, and I'd say you need to have some math skills. Oh, I hate math. So I don't think coding in and of itself, if the objective is to get more people into those tech fields, is going to cut it if they don't have the math skills to do it. And so.
Dr. Galligan, did you have something to connect those things together, perhaps?
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Ordway, as I mentioned before, Deer Valley, our previous board, approved a definition for computational thinking for that very reason. Starting at our youngest levels in pre-K 12, helping build those computational thinking skills helps enhance their math experience and learning, as well as just an appreciation for mathematics.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No. Oh.
7.
All right, so moving on. At last, I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve ADM Group pending final agreement on the terms of the contract as the architect for the Arrowhead Elementary School Modernization Project per RFQ number 17-023.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Ms. O'Brien?
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the 2017-18 extracurricular tax credit and fee authorization.
Second.
Any questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so, all right, so I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve consent agenda items 8B through 8F and 8H.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien, consent agenda?
So the first item pulled out for separate consideration is 8A, approve the minutes for the special and regular governing board meetings on June 27th, 2017.
I only pulled those because they are, the comments are the same with the time. But they also have a summary and the time. Since I wasn't there and so I don't know if those meet each individual member's belief of what you presented, or what your statement was. So is anybody who was at that meeting opposed to what this says that you did say or didn't say? Because like I said, again, the minutes, the electronic is not the official, is not actually in the minutes. Yes, Ms. O'Brien. Anybody else opposed to what their minutes say?
I'm not opposed.
Okay. So for these, if we can just approve them,
Okay.
all those in favor?
I think I have to make a motion.
You did
Don't
motion.
I? Okay, never mind.
Aye.
Aye.
Since I wasn't there, I will abstain.
All right, and so item 8G, I move that the governing board accept the professional travel for the superintendent to attend the Mid-States Benchmarking Consortium in Franklin, Tennessee from October 25th, 2017 through October 27th, 2017.
Second.
And since I was the one who asked to have this pulled off the consent agenda, I do have a few questions. How many other employees will be attending with you? And what will the true cost of this be? I know that the board, in our policies, we do not approve other employee out-of-state travel, that we're simply looking at your travel. And I know Franklin, Tennessee sounds like a very exciting place to go to. But just to give context, I would appreciate knowing what's the total price tag for this and how many people are attending? And what do you hope to accomplish?
President Fisher, Ms. Frank, Jim and I will tag team this. Currently, the cost would be just about $1,000 per individual, and that would include host fees, registration fees, airfare, transportation, lodging, and meals. So that's what makes up the bulk of that cost. In addition to Dr. Finch, there would be 11 other individuals who would attend. This year is a unique year in that the consortium has identified the focus of the benchmarking is on our high schools, our secondary education, and as opposed to previous years, we have been asked to bring a high school administrator, as have all of the benchmarking districts. So there is an additional person, which would be a high school administrator. The other folks that are made up are finance, CIA, data, communications, continuous improvement, our ALS administrator, evaluator, HR, special education, and technology. That makes up the group of, what do we call them? Like job groups that meet together during the benchmark, as opposed to the big group that meets to begin and end the benchmarking. And I'll have Jim add anything else.
I have a question.
So
I think
we're
President
$12,000.
President Fisher, yeah, so roughly $12,000 to $13,000 is the projected cost. And I think the other question that might have been asked by Ms. Frank was, what do we expect to learn? So we do share data with, and all these districts are like districts, so similar size, similar configuration as to Deer Valley School District. And there's the host gets to determine exactly how the each consortium meeting will be held, but it is done collaboratively with all the members of the consortium. So there is a participation that we have in that endeavor. But most of the time, just from attending for the last several years, I have benefited from the job-alike settings where I'm meeting with my colleagues from these other like districts throughout the nation, and we learn things like best practices. So it's a sharing of information of how other districts have done things. Later on this agenda, we're going to speak to partnering with an agency to provide for certain supports for students. That was learned from the benchmarking consortium. Some of the cyber security has been learned from the benchmarking consortium. Just to give you two examples of things. I think the most valuable part of the time is beyond the networking with peers and colleagues in like settings is the job-alike settings, to be able to find how other districts that are similar to Deer Valley throughout the nation are addressing very similar questions and concerns that they have to contend with.
How is this different than ASBO and all the local that don't cost us $12,000 for a couple days?
President Fisher, that's a great question as well. And many of these, in fact, all of the members, and I can speak specifically for my job alikes, the CFOs or associate superintendents of these districts, most of them are members of international ASBO, and so are pass cross in that setting on an international level. And this is much less expensive than an international or national conference, but it differs in that we get a perspective that is not unique just to Arizona. So not always will a solution that works in Illinois also work in Arizona, but it does allow for some creative thinking on how to address concerns that we might have similarly tried to find a solution to.
Ms. Frank?
Okay. So how often do you send this many people to this specific conference? Is it every other year? Every year?
President Fisher, Ms. Frank, so the conference is held annually, and this would be the first time that we are suggesting we would take this many people, because we're including one or two high school principals in the list of potential participants.
So that would mean you normally send 8 or 9
Correct.
people to this every year?
Every year that we don't host. So one year we actually hosted, and so everybody came to Deer Valley. So we didn't travel at all.
Are other schools or other districts, they bring 12 people too? Is that typical of this conference?
President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, yes. Each member district is asked to bring those same job-alike positions. In some cases, it's a shared position, so it might be different. In other cases, they may have more than one person that serves in those capacities. So it varies, but it's about this. On average, it would be about that number of people for each district.
Well, I do see the value in these types of conferences. I know I have attended professional development conferences. I was able to go to the National Science of Teachers Association one year when they had a regional conference in Phoenix. So there definitely is value in going to those. I didn't go to it every year because my campus couldn't afford to send me to do that. And I realize that we're not voting on whether 11 people go to this conference. We're only voting on one person, and I certainly wouldn't want to leave the top guy out of the party. I guess for myself, I would say this is something we really need to look at. Do we need to send 11 people or 9 people? Can 4 people come back and report and maybe rotate year to year? When we have declining enrollment and we're looking at budget shortfalls every year when the budget comes up, I think these are the kinds of things that may seem small, but we need to look at them. So that's my 2 cents or $13,000 worth for what it's worth.
I agree with Ms. Frank.
I have to say, I don't think it's reasonable to send people every year. I really don't. When you're talking about spending $12,000 every year, we could have a secretary. At least part-time. That front office that needs a part-time person, we could have a part-time clerk. We could have a secretary. least part-time, that front office that needs a part-time person, we could have a part-time clerk. I 100% I support professional development. I definitely support collaborative, but I do not see what this benchmarking would provide that the local ASBO doesn't provide, or some of the local other would provide. Even we as a board, when we went to the national, we said this is great, but not every year, because every year is excessive. And each of the last several years that when you did travel, something happened in the district, and all administrators were gone. All top level administrators were gone. I believe the last time you traveled, flasher in the desert outside of one of our elementaries or something of that nature. I'm concerned that this is a priority for adults, not a priority for our kids or for our district as a whole. And I've got to say, I don't support wasted spending. I do support professional development. I support I know the ASBO. I'm assuming that you and Ms. Mock and probably a few individuals will go down to Tucson for ASBO, one of the best conferences of the year. I 100% support that. You can learn so much. I'm sure there's an equivalent to for curriculum. I know there is because I pay those bills. But $12,000 for a conversation you could have with Ken Hicks or one of the other business managers, or that Dr. Finch could have with Dr. Gueston or even Denise Birdwell. I mean, I find it concerning.
I don't mean to interrupt, but we're talking about sending Dr. Finch.
Yep.
We're kind of off topic with the other 11,000.
I've
All right,
said that.
so all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Abstain.
I'm opposed.
I'm opposed.
Move on to 9.
Okay. That one we did. All consent agenda. Okay. Great. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the human resources changes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the use of insurance proceeds for fiscal year 2017-18.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the teacher-only legislative pay plan and resolution for fiscal year 2017-18.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, has Ann not been voting, Kim? Oh, she is. She's just doing it quietly. Okay, I'm just double checking.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to levy the increased primary property tax rate of the district to pay for increased expenditures over the state-imposed spending limit.
Second.
We have had a request for a roll call vote, so we will do so. Ms. O'Brien. Ms. Ordway.
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy.
Nay.
Ms. Frank.
And this is what we were talking about earlier with the adjacent ways. Well, kind of where I stand on this, well, not kind of, is where I stand on this, is I don't like to see taxes increased, but I also have a concern, I think Ms. Fisher alluded to earlier, that if we do not vote for this, and we have 2 more projects upcoming that will need adjacent ways, and if there is a benefit to the taxpayer in doing it this way, as Mr. Miglerino suggested, I will reluctantly vote aye.
And because we are actually reducing it from the prior year, I will also vote aye.
Ready?
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to adopt the 2017-18 expenditure budget.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, next one is, we're done on photo ones. Okay, preview items. We are previewing Southwest Behavioral and Health Services Memorandum of Understanding.
President Fisher, members of the board, Dr. Finch, I do want to share with you some information regarding the, this particular item. I'm not the expert by any stretch of the imagination, so I might have to defer to several others if you have any questions. If the presentation is that good, then we'll just move on. Again, it is a preview item. We do intend to bring this back for formal consideration on, I believe, August 8th is our next scheduled meeting. So we did identify some need by talking to the staff at our schools, as well as the advanced ed report that said that we needed to improve the social and emotional supports for students. And as I mentioned earlier, through that benchmarking consortium, we did identify that outside agencies was an option that was considered by the benchmarking consortium districts. And so we investigated that further with them and found that that is a fiscally viable option to be able to improve that area. The student support services staff, in working in conjunction with other district staff, investigated various options that would, and various providers that would provide these services for us. They determined that Southwest Behavioral Health could provide those services for us, and in fact do so in several other districts, most notably Dysart School District, Chandler School District, Creighton School District, just to name a few. And the schools that are being considered under this happen to be, and they're named here based on how there would be some shared FTE or full-time equivalent staffing of the counselors. So Constitution and Paseo Hills would be shared. Village Meadows and Esperanza would be shared. Barry Goldwater High School would have their own counselor, and so would Vista Peak under the arrangement that is being proposed. There would be a memorandum of understanding that we would enter into between the district and Southwest Behavioral Health Services. And the original or initial MOU has been reviewed by our contracted attorney, Mr. David Cantalme, and comments have been sent back to Southwest Behavioral, and they have been very accommodating in terms of some of the edits, but it has not been finalized as of yet. We would work on that between now and that August 8th, or prior to the August 8th meeting, so that you would have a full understanding of what that memorandum of understanding would contain. And the counselors would be able to provide these services for any access eligible students that we would have, and as well as any other students on a prescribed fee-based schedule. So the benefit that Southwest Behavioral gets is they get an office to be able to office out of to provide these services that they're trained to offer, and can bill for those that are eligible through access, as well as they can get some private pay clients as well. Our obligation is we would need to provide an office for them and the space to effectively deliver the services that are in the MOU. As I mentioned, in terms of next steps, it is that particular instrument or document is being finalized by the attorneys. I've written here the governing board to formally approve the MOU. It's formally consider. You either approve it or don't approve it, I guess, so I don't want to be too presumptuous with that, but we were targeting that for August 8th. The schools would then identify the appropriate office space for that. We would integrate that counselor into the school community and through the typical beginning of school events. And then we find the referral process so that through one of our administrative management guidelines so that there'd be a clear understanding of how those services would be delivered. So again, it is a preview item this evening. We would bring this back again. It would show up as old business pending any discussion that might happen this evening.
Ms. Ordway.
These counselors would be in addition to, this would be counseling in addition to the schools that already have counselors, so that Goldwater wouldn't lose.
Yeah, President Fisher, Ms. Ordway, yes, we would not change any of our staffing as a result of this. This would be in addition to the staffing that already exists.
So it would be open then to the families of the students and the community as a whole, kind of like first things first, and our, just went out of my head, our other health.
Are you talking about the clinic at
Yes.
Sunrise? Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, very similar to the clinic and other programs like First Things First. So it would be available to the community and even to staff members as well.
And only to those campuses, or would it be available to?
Initially, for those specific identified campuses, just based on the caseload that they're projecting from the student populations at those particular schools, but gives us the opportunity to expand the program in the event
onto
of
other
need.
campuses? Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Ms. Frank.
How would you determine, or how would schools determine who would receive counseling or receive benefits from Southwest Behavioral Health? Is it a family would ask or self-refer, or teachers would refer, or a combination of that?
All of those, I'm sorry, President Fisher, Ms. Frank, all of those would be likely ways, and again, that would be refined to that referral process that would need to be developed in the administrative management guidelines. So it could be self-referral, it could be through services that we're already providing to maybe a family or a student that think that they, and we believe that they need additional services, so it would be a collaborative process.
Okay. Because I know I certainly saw kids who had a crisis or had some type of mental health or emotional issues that maybe were not on an IEP and receiving services through that, and there was really very little intervention for those kids and for their families, and this certainly seems like it would fill this need. But I would really want to know that those kids that don't qualify for services under IDEA would still be able to access this, and it would catch that group, because we're losing kids. I can think of a couple right now that are students from Deer Valley, now adults, who, not in a good way, who would have benefited from something like this, and services were not available to them.
President Fisher, Ms. Frank, exactly, and as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we've noticed that as well, not only from feedback we've gotten from the school staff, but also, as I mentioned, in the advanced ed report, and some of those anecdotal stories that we hear, or actual stories that we hear of services that we haven't been able to provide, or at least connect people to. This would fill that void.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead and move on to 10B. First readings of the policies. These are the policies that the board brought forward, some based on our initial board retreat in January. Actually, I think they were all semi-based on that and conversations that occurred. So the first one is the BEDB, which is the agenda. I did bring this one forward. The policy that you see is based on our conversation. One of the things that the board mentioned, and it has mentioned even prior to our January meeting, was how difficult it is to move things around on the agenda. You have to change the policy every time. So what I did is I looked at other districts to see what their policies were, and found that, I found actually a couple of them that have this same language. Essentially, it gives you the ability, we can keep the exact same format we have, but if the board says I want to move X to down there versus up here, Like for me, it's easier for me to say, call to order and then pledge of allegiance. Our agendas say it the other way. So it's just gives you a little more discretion of moving things around on the agenda versus saying you have to do it in this order. And I think it'll meet the needs that we had discussed in January. So that was the purpose for this. Then the attorney read through it and he added in the legalese for our executive sessions, and then our accommodations.
Best was adding a section for discussion because we don't.
Right, and this being open like this allows us to do that. So we can keep, even though the top section, the underlined part that the attorney put, that's our policy. Our agenda can still look the same. We can add components and we can move components around for what best meets the board's meeting needs. Or if the superintendent had something that he needed to add in here. Let's say there is no old business. Our agenda doesn't have to say old business. We just don't put it on there.
And we can add a section if we want?
Yes,
Okay.
that was the purpose for having this open language. And I didn't know if, one of the questions that was asked was why do agendas do this? And it's generally a board member at some point in the line of many board members that decides, I want control, I want it to look like this always. And so they put it in policy, or they get two other people to put it in policy with them. And so it stays that way. And so that was why I brought this one forward. Ms. Ordway.
What do we mean by discussion? How are we gonna, what do we mean by that? Because we discussed things already, so how do we?
She's talking about when we had our retreat in January. We had talked about, I believe it's right after, look at actually one of our agendas. We had talked about having a specific area where we could just have discussion items. And that may be part of where we also talked about having study sessions and that type of thing. But if there's an item that we're not necessarily, and we had talked about putting it down here by the previews. It's not necessarily going to come to a vote, but it's something that we need to discuss, or we as a board want to, because 5 of us can't meet together and discuss something necessarily. So that was part of that conversation, is that we put something here. We also had talked about putting agenda requests in that area versus making them be a part of our board reports. And so this was just to honor the requests from that January meeting.
So we would have a preview and a discussion section, or how would we do that? Because we would have to identify what we're discussing. Right, but it would have to be identified.
It would, yeah, it would.
So,
They would still have to be requests. And we also had talked about putting our requests in that area. And I can't tell you whether it was Ann, Kim, Darcy, or Jenny that said it. I don't have my notes from that meeting, but that was what we, one of the items that we had talked about was making the agenda policy friendlier to use, because as it is so rigid that we can't move anything.
It was actually Dr. V that suggested adding the discussion because he
Oh, yeah, it
said
might
that
have
there
been.
were things that he would get in that he couldn't figure out where they
I was
fit.
just wondering where we were going to put it.
Yeah, and we could determine where we're gonna put it and what it's used for as a board.
Because I just don't want to get into having discussion where it could be a study session and make the board meetings even longer without a focus.
No, they would still have to be agendized. We can't just throw in a discussion and then randomly talk. They still would have
Well,
to have.
but that would be a discussion, would be randomly talking.
Yeah, no, we would have to be we could have a discussion section, and then we would have to have let's say you wanted, okay, here's a good example. When Miss O'Brien was going through, when she was championing the MRC, getting that shut down. I know one of the things is that she had wanted that on an agenda, and the then president told her, that's not a district concern, we're not putting that on, which I don't know why he didn't just put it on anyways, he should have. But that was, I think, part of
Well,
situations like that. where
Right,
it's
but if you weren't going to put it on an agenda, you wouldn't add it to the discussion either. I'm just saying, I don't want to elongate these meetings
that
any
is
longer than they are.
Right,
So I
that
want to
isn't
make
my
sure
thing,
that a
but-
change would be to focus and to make it more efficient for everyone and our business to get done. So
Well, that is the purpose of it.
that's what I'm looking for.
That is the purpose of it, and this is what we discussed in our board retreat, is that we wanted to have the ability to move stuff around on the agenda versus being rigid that we have to do A, B, C, or D at every meeting.
Right, and along with that, though, we did talk about being more efficient with our time and respectful of others' time, so.
Yes. Yes, Ms. O'Brien? Do you want to have more people in the agenda review? Is that, am I understanding you correctly? You want to have more people in the agenda review? That's a different policy we'd have to change. I'm just asking. Mm-hmm.
Well, to your point, we used to do that too. We'd have a vice president at it or another board member.
I believe it might be in here. Oh, that's in, yeah, that is in there. I mean, when we get to that policy to look at it, we can discuss that. But we would also have to change our policies on duties of the president and vice president. And we could just simply do that as well. That would be a future change we'd have to do, but. And I think that's already, I know that one thing that we discussed is Ms. Frank joining us as it is already. So that's already occurring or going to occur. So, does anybody else have any other comments on this one policy or things they want to change or adjust or anything?
I'd just like maybe in between now and August, maybe we could see an example of what it would look like.
What do you mean?
Just an example of where discussion would go, how it would be labeled, what part of the strategic plan these pieces of the, right. Okay, so what would discussion be labeled as?
Discussion, we would just add it.
So we would just be able to talk about anything that we would want to without being agendized? That's what I'm asking. How would we label that?
No, right where this says preview,
Mm-hmm.
it would say discussion. Preview is an item that is going to be an old business next.
Yes,
And that's our current
it's
process.
specific though, so the
Right.
discussion will be specific.
It would say discussion. Like let's,
Uh-huh.
the example I used earlier, it would say discussion, and then it would say, legislative work on the MRC. That
Okay,
would have
so,
been-
but we
so
would have a description.
Correct, it would
Okay.
be specific.
That's all I want to make sure, is that we have a description.
Miss Red, Kim, she's walking out. Why don't you catch her?
Want Kim Crooks?
Yes, I'll just call her, never mind.
Kim Crooks.
Thank you, Mr. Malvin.
Yeah, I'll just call her.
I just want to make
That's
sure
all
that
it
we're,
would be.
yeah.
It's just that we
Okay.
would, but whatever the topic would still have to be agendized. We can't
Right.
talk about something that's not agendized.
Correct. I just want to make sure that we're specific on that.
The topic would have to be there, yes. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So much for 45 minutes. First reading of policy, BEDBA. Ms. O'Brien, this is one you brought forward. You want to speak to it? Okay.
Luck with those minutes, Ms. Rowe.
Well, one of the concerns I had with doing it that way, saying something that gets tabled, and I know the next policy that we have is the rules of order. We don't have a specific adopted rules of order. However, if we did, in general, and I'll just read you the rule of order. It talks about what is considered an unnecessary motion, and under unnecessary motion is listed to table an item. And this is the definition of to table an item. The purpose of a motion to table is either to postpone consideration of the motion, which is treated by the motion to postpone, or to defeat a motion which is realized by the meeting ultimate disposition of the issue. It should be treated as a motion to postpone. So as I looked at a lot of and I looked at the general different rules, and I looked at Robert's rule, and I know we don't have any one specific adopted, but the one thing I found consistently was, if you want to move an item to the next meeting, your motion needs to be, I motion to postpone to the next meeting or to a future meeting. If you're going to motion to table, like let's say we were going to motion to table, the appropriate use of motioning to table would be, we're going to motion to table 8A until after 10B, because Mr. Miglerino is going to get us some additional information in that time frame. And then we address it there. We would then pull it from the table and address it. So my concern is that, or my preference would be, and it's up to the board's discretion, would be that instead of saying the table, is that we put in the policy that if we're going to move something, we don't just say we're going to table it, we say we're going to postpone it and have it be an official appropriate motion. And I'm thinking that may be why in the past presidents didn't bring it back, because I know I've seen it happen multiple times, is because basically if something's tabled and is not addressed by the end of the meeting, it's dead. From all the rules that I can find, so the appropriate motion would be to postpone. Would you be fine with changing it to say, to where we stop using tabling and just go to postpone? Okay, is everyone else fine with putting that in the policy, or?
I would still like to have the right to table. I mean, sometimes you're tabling something because you actually don't feel like supporting it, but you're not trying to kill it for good. But you don't know how long. Like you just.
Well, it's the table, and tabling does kill it. Tabling either you're postponing or you kill it.
Well, so I think usually you table, you're postponing it. You would just vote no if you wanted to kill it.
I
Fine with postpone.
Ms. O'Brien?
table postpone as long as there's a time frame, and I think that's the point that Mrs. O'Brien is looking for.
Right.
Is that when we're not going to discuss something at the given time that we said we were going to, that whether we say we're tabling it until February 3rd, or we're postponing
Right.
the discussion until February 3rd, as long as the time frame's there, I think that's what she's
But if we say we
going
want
for.
to, could we say we want to postpone this indefinitely?
Suppose you could say
If
that.
that were the motion,
Alright.
if that were the
If
motion,
if
it
that
could
would be the
pass.
motion you wanted.
Right.
I think, though, that if in the interest of time or something, then we decide that we're not going to stay here till 10:30, and at the beginning of the meeting, we see that we had an overzealously packed agenda, and we say we're going to table this until the next meeting, we don't just say we're going to table this, we give a time frame.
Right. And I'm just saying I would prefer
Or
we use-
postpone, whichever
I
word you
Postpone
want
is
to
fine.
use.
prefer we
Just
use
so we can,
postpone-
yeah.
Postpone,
Doesn't
just
matter to me.
because it's in the written language, and I'm thinking for future boards, they don't have to deal with this again. Yep. Is where we discuss putting the two members. And that is what we had discussed in January. The only thing I would like to add to that is, unless majority of the board objects to the item. And the only reason I thought about adding that, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but in times of controversy, if you have two board members that are really stuck on an item, they could bring that at every meeting, and by policy, you have to put it on every single one.
Well,
I think that would be a good idea.
yeah, and to that point, how would you, unless you voted on something, how would you know that 3 members
I
are
was
objecting to 2 members, or 4 members are objecting to one, or whatever?
Well, I'm thinking more of a historical situation that occurred, and I'm not gonna go into detail because hopefully it's long since dead, but, where 2 members, and majority of this board was not even here. I'm just telling you, this was that's how long ago this was. But I do know that there were, 2 board members who would have if they had in policy where all they had to do was request it and it happened, every single meeting would have had an agenda item on there that was just really to muck up business. So
I may have a thought on that.
right. So I would support that we in other words, at that time, let's say I said, I want to bring forth a thing that says all teachers have to have something or whatever. And Jenny goes, yeah, I'm going to go with that too. And then the 3 of you said, yeah, I'm opposed to that even being on an agenda. That's kind of.
But
Yeah. I'm fine with that if the rest of the board is.
I'm fine.
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't want one direction like we've had, and I don't want the other direction either. Okay, I think we're good with that. First reading of BEDD, Rules of Order. Correct, to put it in the format that we had discussed.
That looks good.
Is anybody opposed to the format that we had discussed?
No.
Does anybody have any additions?
No.
If you do between now and then, please let Dr. Finch know. Thank you. First reading of BGB, Policy Adoption. Already it has my signature, which means I brought it forward. Okay. When we were looking at this the last time, it just didn't make sense that if a policy was going to come forward and it's brought by person A, we do it this way, person B, we do it this way, person C. It didn't make sense that we were going to prevent the policy-making board from bringing policy forward in the same way that anyone else would. It's brought forward, we have it in meeting 1, it's legal reviewed, we have it in meeting 2. It was just to simplify, and continuing to keep our emergency declaration as granted in statute. So, does anybody have an opposition to it? Mm-hmm. Correct. Actually, this was prior to us coming. No, I know, but what we have crossed out was here before. But if you notice the part that was added where it says in a board declared emergency, the one thing that I did verify when this was being reviewed by Dave was that we still have to go through the process. We cannot. It has to be a true declared emergency, like we need to change policy because, I don't know, a tragedy's occurred or something. And statute actually allows us to set aside a policy anyways.
Statute 38431.
Right. And so, but this just, if a board member brings it forward, we still have to go through the same process. We bring it forward. Which per the attorney, it would have been illegal.
That was per the attorney.
Yeah. I'm just telling you that it's, I just think it's unnecessary to have a lot of language to pigeonhole the board from being able to bring forward a policy.
Well,
And I mean, if we want to do it that way, then we can do it, we could do it one way or the other, always. Oh, I think that would be an awesome idea. I think that would be an awesome idea that we put in. Oh. No, and I definitely agree. We don't want that, but we don't want to uphold the others. So I think it would be fine to add.
And to that point, we can also.
Yeah, this was mine. Yeah, this one was mine. So.
I also would say that we would have the
Legal review.
well, that too, but we would have the availability to decide to have a study session in place of a preview at a board meeting. So however we can work.
Do you want to
that
put
in.
that in policy? I mean, we can have a study
I
session
do.
at any time you want that.
I
actually
do,
in the
because
policy.
then we don't have to have the first. We might not have to have a first.
So you want to put it in lieu of? On the
Yes,
first
that it
reading.
can be in
Okay,
lieu of.
we can do
Because
that.
I think that then satisfies everyone's needs and prevents things from being rushed through.
We can do that. Time frame and in lieu of. I'll work with Dr. Finch on that. Ms. Frank and Ms. Tweedy, anything else you wanted on that one?
No.
Okay. First reading of BHC, Board Communication with Staff Members. Again, this one was mine. One of the concerns was that and it was actually the original concern was brought by staff members or by other members that our policy basically made our board unaccessible. As a board, we do want to follow the appropriate chain of command, the appropriate process, but we also don't want in policy to have where our employees have to be afraid to talk to board members. And that was the whole purpose of adding the statement at the bottom, which says we are open to their communications, but that we also will follow the regular chain of command. Are there any questions or concerns on this one?
How has this been through legal?
Yes.
Okay, what were the opinions on it? Are there notes?
Not that I received. I received it exactly like this. Were there any notes, Kim, that you know of?
I'm not putting you on the spot to look for it right now if you don't have them. But my question is one of the main reasons why we push things through a chain is because at some point in time we are going to be, or we can be, responsible for making a vote. So if Jenna calls Jenny, using the J words, I'm getting tired, alliteration's important, and she skips every other portion she's supposed to go through. Now whatever this issue was that she has comes to the board. Now she's taken away her right to, or she's given up her right to have any kind of input when we're having.
This doesn't change that.
I think it would.
It doesn't. It says it right here. It says structure noted above for official specific business should not prevent communication. It's simply saying that we are going to follow this, but it should not prevent communication. The original comment that was brought forward was, I am not talking to a board member ever. I don't care what
No, I'm not
it's
referring
about
to that. But what I'm saying is that if she talks about something that there's a problem, an issue, and says, hey, Jenny, you know, this is going on, and I really need you to blah, blah, blah. She then says, absolutely, and then starts a back and forth conversation, and then finally goes to the superintendent or whomever. She's already has more information than the rest of the board members. And
Policy's not going to change that. Individuals are going to go to
well,
individual
individuals
board
already do. I think this distorts.
Yeah.
I just think this ends up distorting our roles and almost encourages people not to follow the chain because they already email us
So
anyway.
what are you saying? If we're going to vote on something, we're not allowed to hear anybody's opinion of it, but the district office?
No, I'm saying that when you become intimately involved in something that you're going to make a decision on and you have more information than the rest of your board members, then you're not supposed to be weighing in.
What do you?
So
Well, I guess
I'm confused by that.
I'm confused
Kind
by that too.
We're
I
not
guess
supposed to
if
have
I
an
had
informed.
I mean, you would have the same right to go track down information from all stakeholders as I would.
Right.
And so what are we going to, like, whoever tracked down the most information can't vote?
No,
I guess I'm confused as well, because it says the board welcomes the opinion and other input from employees and public in general on all matters. And it says structure noted above for official specific business. 'Cause I do understand what you're talking about. If
well, it's late, and I know we're trying to make up or get examples, but I guess I'm just not understanding why we're adding that, because people already do it. It is already okay for someone to email a board member.
Because one of the main things that we have already had in every single survey that's been done is that the board is not accessible. The board, we cannot talk to the board. The board is not open to any discussion. The board is not open to our opinion. And they're not talking about addressing.
So
they're
do
not
you
talking
think that
about
they're going to
addressing
read this
specific
policy and all of a
problems.
sudden come to us if they don't?
This is a policy that was brought by community. It's just, that's the only reason. And putting it that they are allowed to talk to us and give input, it's just basically an invitation to put input. It doesn't say we're not going to follow the regular process, and we should. That was the purpose of it.
Okay.
First reading of
Awesome.
GCCE, professional and support staff conferences. This one I also brought forward because I was shocked. Every district I have ever worked in, all out-of-state travel is approved by the board because there's a financial impact, a significant financial impact sometimes. And my bad, I did not realize, I guess because I see travel come through. So, I've never really gotten deep into travel. But then I realized that, there is a lot of travel, and we don't know the cost, and because it never comes before the board, it's never presented before the board. This is one of those many things that historically, from what I can tell, and it's only from what I can tell because I haven't been here forever, but it's just never brought before the board. And I think that there's such a fiscal impact that it's responsible that we do see out-of-state travel as other districts do. I also believe that it's important that we're aware when one of our administrators or staff or whoever is going to be out of town, and they're potentially, I don't know, maybe liability issues. I've never seen a district that doesn't put out-of-state travel before their board. So I was shocked when I saw it, and so I pulled this and I put the language in. Any comments, questions?
I agree with you on that one, Ms. Fisher. It doesn't make sense to me that we have to approve the board's travel. We have to approve all of the students' travel. We have to approve the superintendent's travel, but yet the rest of the employees can travel without board approval. So that seems inconsistent to me.
That was all the purpose. Ms. Ordway?
Do you know what, or do we have a look, which districts have you looked at? Because it'll be interesting for them to receive a process. Because I think there's hundreds of people that travel, so we want to not make them start from scratch.
Isn't just travel, it's out-of-state travel, but
Right, no, I know, well, we had how many thousands?
Glendale
Yeah.
L actually has out-of-county, which I think is a bit excessive, but they have out-of-county and out-of-state. Phoenix Union does out-of-state.
Because that's going to be a lot of, it's just going to be a lot for us to approve, so I just want to make sure maybe we can give them a leg up on a process.
That many people traveling
do.
out-of-state,
I think so.
then I think maybe we need to identify why we're traveling so much out-of-state. Perhaps we can pay salaries.
Yeah.
Saying.
All I was asking for is to maybe give them a beginning of a process, that's all. I don't know how many
I
people
could pull
travel
from
out of
3 or
state.
4 districts a process.
And I'm sure you guys can come up
I'm
with
sure
your
you
own
can as well.
process.
Yeah. And it's only out-of-state. Other districts do out-of-county, which I personally believe is excessive. Phoenix Union even does local travel, but not before the board.
I don't think it's unreasonable to look at out-of-state travel again. We look at board travel, superintendent's travel, student travel. I think it's just consistent across the board to have the same expectation for all groups. And it would be unreasonable to just put all travel in as a blanket, or even, I can see, although Maricopa County is quite large, as I found out, I mean, I have to have my director approve if I'm traveling out of county, but if we're saying out of state, I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation.
I will say I had originally wrote it for out-of-county because I did pull exactly what others had done. And then I thought, oh, heck no, then we have to look at ASBO, and we have to look at, and I just thought that was getting excessive. But out-of-state is significant. Any other questions or comments on this one?
Nope.
Okay, future meetings are posted. A much larger calendar, and our 15-minute meeting was 2.5 hours. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Aye. Oh, you didn't ask for the vote.
All those in favor?
Aye. So all of you out there, you all look like the winners of a Survivor contest. And congratulations.